Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
For the fifth day in a row, the woman had been following her husband, suspecting him of infidelity. Arriving at her mother-in-law's summer house, she froze upon seeing on the porch. On a July Monday evening, Rebecca Olvera felt like she had died. It happened unexpectedly. She was rummaging through her husband's bag, grumbling softly. He had returned the previous evening from a sanatorium where his mother had been resting. Augustine, 30 years old, but still like a child. "You bring home your things, so you need to unpack them. Why do I have to do everything? Surely Belinda sent some of her dirty clothes for you to bring back to make her return trip easier." Augustine, engrossed in a blockbuster on TV, did not hear his wife's complaints. Nor did he hear her surprised exclamation. "Oh," Rebecca said aloud, and mentally added, "Oh indeed. There you go, you naive fool, here's your perfect family life, served on a platter." Among the towels, presumably belonging to her mother-in-law, was a piece of underwear. This very personal item of clothing could fit on the plump Belinda Diegas only if she put it on her arm, not where it was supposed to go. This discovery made Rebecca suddenly realize that all the pieces of the scattered puzzle had fallen into place. The distorted picture of her family life revealed itself in its full ugliness. Augustine was cheating on her. He covered it up with various respectable excuses, shamelessly betraying their relationship, disregarding their feelings, despite living together for 7 years and supposedly living well, overcoming different hardships together, celebrating each other's successes without the slightest hint of envy, without arguing about who contributed more to the family budget. Even the lack of children, which worried their mothers on both sides, was a conscious joint decision by the couple to wait. They truly thought there was no rush. Rebecca was only 18 when she got married, and only recently had she started thinking about having children. However, Augustine never brought up the topic, and she was too shy to even hint at it. Now, the issue of starting a family seemed insignificant compared to the much bigger problem. Rebecca felt the urge to throw a huge fit, to make even the devils feel nauseous. She imagined storming into the room and slapping Augustine in the face with that piece of clothing. Her first angry impulse quickly passed when she realized she was still holding the mistress's underwear. It felt incredibly disgusting. Rebecca crumpled it up and threw the evidence of her husband's betrayal back into the bag. Her old basketball hobby paid off, and within a fraction of a second, the incriminating evidence was back where she had found it. Suddenly, Rebecca found it hard to breathe. Fortunately, the washing machine was installed in the kitchen, and overcoming the pain caused by the wound of her husband's betrayal, she took a few steps and sank into a chair. She tried to argue with herself mentally, thinking that Augustine might not be to blame for what had happened. Maybe her mother-in-law had accidentally taken her neighbor's underwear along with her own belongings? It's possible, considering that the room might have been cramped or there was only one wardrobe for 2 people. Although her relationship with her mother-in-law had become quite normal, Rebecca didn't want to call Belinda to check if such a curious incident could have happened. She felt embarrassed for some reason. It was surprising that she felt guilty, as if she were the one to blame. The loud sound of an adventure movie came from the room, preventing her from concentrating and calmly thinking about how to deal with her husband and how to punish him if he had indeed decided to have some fun on the side. Rebecca meticulously went over all the moments that had been troubling her soul lately, which had been happening more and more frequently. The most significant was her husband's regular absence from home. For about a month, Augustine had been spending almost all his free time without her, giving strange reasons for his absences. No, taken individually, they might have seemed respectable and justified, but there were just too many of them. On Tuesday and Thursday, her husband would say something like, "Darling, I'll go to the summer house in the morning, fill the tank with water, and water the garden while there's still water. Then, I'll have to stay at work a bit longer. My boss agreed to this schedule for me." The day before the weekend, Augustine would say he had promised to help a friend or that there was a team-building event at work. Yes, all these oddities had been going on for about a month, and in the past 2 weeks, Augustine had suddenly developed an acute sense of filial duty. While Belinda was recovering at a country sanatorium, Augustin would go to her apartment almost every other day to water her plants. He claimed it was because the weather was hot, the apartment felt like a sauna at midday, and his mother's favorite plants could suffer. Even Belinda herself didn't care for these violets as tenderly. Now, Rebecca clearly saw the oddity in her husband's behavior. Usually, the task of taking care of the plants fell on her shoulders, but not this year. Augustin, gently hugging his wife, would say she was already too tired, and it was no burden for him to handle these chores. Rebecca had even suggested moving her mother-in-law's beloved plants to the bathroom, where it was always cooler. She could turn on the grow lights there to ensure they had enough light. But her husband opposed this perfectly reasonable suggestion. He seemed to have a logical argument: water and electricity unattended weren't a good combination. Yet, her heart remained uneasy. Rebecca was deeply troubled and didn't know what to do. It would be good to talk to someone and get some advice, but whom could she turn to? The most obvious and at the same time the least suitable option was to call her mother. If her mother found out about her suspicions regarding Augustin's fidelity, she would be very upset, likely start taking tranquilizers, say that she never expected anything good from her son-in-law, then declare that all men are inherently unfaithful, and her blood pressure would rise. No, she couldn't worry her mother under any circumstances. Rebecca didn't have close friends with whom she could discuss such a delicate matter. Yes, she had many acquaintances, being a kind and friendly woman, but she wouldn't dare to confide in any of them. Sharing her domestic problems with colleagues was also a losing idea. Not only would it elicit unnecessary pity, but there would be no guarantee of keeping personal information confidential. Her reputation as a happy, successful woman would be at risk, and her company's CEO had a peculiar quirk: key positions, even in departments, could only be held by people with stable personal lives. In his view, a harmonious home environment positively impacted work performance. There had already been cases where employees were reassigned after divorces or less significant issues, such as discovered adultery or conflicts. Of course, all formalities were observed, the person didn't seem to lose salary, and no bad records appeared in their work history, but Rebecca did not want to experience such changes. So, there was no one to offer advice on how to proceed, meaning she had to rely on her own wits. Gray spots danced before Rebecca's eyes, a sure sign of an impending migraine, and she frowned. Just what I need right now. If this ailment flared up, she'd be out of commission for a couple of days, and tomorrow she had a meeting with the commercial director. Everything was so untimely. And it was all because of that discovery, or more precisely, Augustin and his infidelity. Speak of the devil, the cause of Rebecca's headache appeared in the kitchen, acting as if nothing had happened. He turned on the kettle, made a couple of sandwiches, glanced at his bag, and said to his wife, "Rebecca, stop fussing around with chores. I'm going to Mom's tomorrow. I'll toss everything in her washing machine so we don't have to lug it back and forth. Besides, come watch a movie with me, it's really good, I didn't expect it." Augustin began to briefly retell the plot to his wife, but Rebecca interrupted him. She had no strength to listen to his empty chatter after discovering the incriminating evidence. "No, thanks, I think I'll just lie down here. I'm tired, it was a tough Monday." "Well, okay, I'll turn the sound down then. And don't turn on the washing machine either, you can't rest with that running." "Should I turn off the light?" Rebecca nodded, feeling a wave of pain. She had no desire to talk to the cheater. Augustin placed the food he had prepared on a tray, grabbed his bag, and left the kitchen, closing the door behind him. In the darkness, her headache subsided a bit, and without realizing it, she fell asleep. In the morning, Rebecca opened her eyes, feeling relieved that it seemed the migraine had decided to spare her and not turn the day into a disaster. The night's rest had been very beneficial, even her certainty about her husband's infidelity wasn't as strong as it had been the day before. Instead, the idea that the neighbor's things had gotten mixed up with her mother-in-law seemed much more plausible. Rebecca stretched on the couch, once again glad she had insisted on buying it, and started getting ready for work while also preparing breakfast. Augustin usually woke up about 40 minutes later since he went to the office at 9, and this morning was no exception. By the time her husband appeared in the kitchen, Rebecca had already had breakfast, left him some food, and was ready to leave. "Rebecca, don't expect me home early tonight. After work, I'll go to Mom's apartment, do the laundry, and check on the plants. She wouldn't forgive me if something happened to her green babies." Jealousy and resentment pierced Rebecca's heart again. She almost recoiled when Augustin, as usual, approached to kiss her, but she managed to endure the customary morning ritual. Rebecca hurried to work, needing to complete her usual tasks before the meeting, but it was hard to concentrate as her thoughts kept drifting back to the discovery in her husband's bag. During the meeting, the commercial director even made a remark. "Rebecca, are you not interested in the topic of our meeting?" "Why do you say that, Rollo?" "I'm listening very attentively." "Strange, you have such a distant look, as if you're somewhere far away." Knowing well how the commercial director spoke, Rebecca repeated several key points. Satisfied with her response, Rollo Bustos interrupted her and continued his speech. While he was talking, Rebecca decided to follow her husband. She finished work earlier, so it wouldn't be difficult to stake out near her mother-in-law's house. The courtyard was a dead end with only one road leading to it, and at the turn, there was a cafe with panoramic windows. Sitting in a good spot, she would have an excellent view. There was no worry that Augustin might stop by the cafe. He had a rare distaste for such places. After making the decision, Rebecca felt a bit calmer and managed to focus on work for the rest of the day, barely thinking about her husband's infidelity. However, as evening approached, she started to feel a bit jittery. After all, what she was about to do was unusual, something she had never done before. This was her debut in the world of secret surveillance. At the cafe, Rebecca ordered a berry juice and a pie that the salesperson highly recommended. It was then that the woman, who suspected her husband of cheating, realized that she had been so preoccupied with her worries that she had forgotten to have lunch. The strawberry filling in the pastry turned out to be exceptionally delicious, making the wait not so difficult. When she saw her husband's car pass by the cafe, Rebecca continued her task. Following her husband wasn't hard. He parked on the paved area, grabbed a sports bag from the back seat, and without looking around, entered his mother's building. A few minutes later, the light in the kitchen window of her apartment turned on. Rebecca waited. If Augustin had a date, the mistress should appear soon. On a warm summer evening, the street was crowded since people used the quiet courtyard as a shortcut. Rebecca's heart skipped a beat every time an attractive woman passed by the entrance, but they all walked by. Only a few boys with a big-eared dog on a leash and two women, clearly around Augustin's mother's age, entered the building. The light was still on only in the kitchen. Rebecca had been standing outside, watching the windows of her mother-in-law's apartment for almost an hour, moving under the cover of passers-by and bushes. Then, the light went out, and she saw her husband leave the building. Alone and with an obviously empty bag. It looked like he was waiting for the washing machine to finish its cycle. Apparently, no one had visited him. The idea that the mistress lived in the same building was too unlikely to believe, unless it was for some melodramatic series. Rebecca hurried home, but on the way, she received a call from her husband. Augustin seemed genuinely concerned that Rebecca hadn't returned from work yet, and she told him she would be home soon. "All right, dear, try not to be late, because I want to order pizza, and eating it cold is not the same." Despite the comforting result of her surveillance debut, Rebecca decided to keep a close eye on her husband for a few more days. "It's not that hard, and I'll get to the bottom of this situation," she thought. "It doesn't matter that I don't have experience and Augustin might notice me. I'll explain somehow." The morning surveillance on Wednesday was disrupted, although the fact that her husband didn't get up at the crack of dawn to go to the dacha was suspicious. However, Rebecca simply couldn't afford to take time off work. In the evening, Augustin went straight home after work, which calmed her a bit. Thursday didn't bring any incriminating evidence against her husband either. He had only visited his mother's apartment once in those days, as if he sensed his wife was watching him. Still, Rebecca understood it was too early to relax. Who knows what kind of schedule her husband had for meeting his mistress, if he indeed had one. Mentally scolding herself, she realized she hadn't even checked her husband's phone. The call history contained many numbers, including some repeated ones, but none stood out immediately. Reading his messages and checking his messenger apps yielded nothing either. Rebecca knew there were online chats where messages disappeared after the session ended, but there was no record of such sites in the browser history. Realizing she was an ordinary person, not a trained specialist, Rebecca decided to go all in and try to disrupt her husband's supposed meeting with his mistress. On Friday evening, she suggested, "Augustine, we've been cooped up at home. How about we go on a spontaneous day trip?" Augustine gave her an apologetic smile and spread his hands. "No, Rebecca, sorry. On Saturday, I'm going to my mom's. You understand, I'll be tired when I get back and won't feel like going out. And Sunday's no good either. My colleagues and I have planned to go to the football game. They built that stadium like a spaceship from a sci-fi movie. We have to see what our taxes are being spent on." Rebecca felt in her gut that her husband was lying. He had never shown an interest in watching a group of athletes chase a ball before, which meant her suspicions were correct. His meeting with the mistress was set for the weekend. She decided to go all in. "Listen, that's perfect. I'll go with you to Belinda's. It's awkward that I haven't visited her yet, and she's coming back from the sanatorium next week, if I'm not mistaken. Afterward, we can tour the area. It'll be a spontaneous trip for us." Augustine tried to dissuade her. "Rebecca, you weren't feeling well at the start of the week. I think you need to rest." Rebecca frowned. "Augustine, it's really rude not to visit my mother-in-law even once, plus I just need a change of scenery." Rebecca hoped to meet her mother-in-law's neighbor and was very insistent. Reluctantly, Augustine agreed to take his wife along on the trip to his mom's. Belinda was delighted to see both her son and daughter-in-law. They had a wonderful time walking along the well-maintained paths among the majestic trees, where even the summer heat felt less oppressive in the dappled shade. Lively little red squirrels, tamed by visitors and staff, amusingly hopped from branch to branch and came down to people for treats. Belinda had prepared seeds and nuts for the walk and handed them to Augustine and Rebecca. "Try feeding them yourselves, they're so funny, using their paws like hands." The squirrels fearlessly descended to the outstretched palms with treats, delicately took the food, and ate it carefully, glancing at people with their intelligent eyes. The tranquility of the walk filled Rebecca's soul with peace. However, on one of the paths, Belinda introduced Rebecca to a woman they met. "This is Andera Canez, my roommate." A woman of almost immense proportions smiled warmly, and Rebecca almost burst into tears. The hope that the item of women's clothing found in her husband's bag belonged to her mother-in-law's roommate shattered. That item could not possibly belong to this corpulent Andera. Trying not to reveal her disappointment and anger, Rebecca continued the walk, but the previous serenity was gone. After saying goodbye to Belinda, the couple left the sanatorium grounds, and Augustine, completely oblivious to his wife's changed mood, suggested, "Shall we go sightseeing as planned?" "Oh, Augustine, I think I've had enough walking for today. Let's just go home." "No problem, I'm pretty tired myself. I have the football game tomorrow, and even though I'm not that old yet, I need to conserve my energy." Irritated, Rebecca couldn't hold back and retorted, "Yeah, you're getting old, and I guess I'm becoming decrepit too." Augustine ignored his wife's annoyed tone, not even bothered that she didn't speak to him on the way home, attributing it to her fatigue. Rebecca marked the 5th day of her surveillance as crucial. If he had a mistress and was supposedly going to a football game he never showed interest in, he was likely heading to a rendezvous. In the morning, Augustine got up very early, even before his wife, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee woke her. When she entered the kitchen, he was almost done with his breakfast. "Well, darling, I'm off," Rebecca sarcastically remarked. "Isn't it a bit early? As far as I know, the football match starts in the evening." He tried to speak convincingly and calmly. "We're meeting up first, chatting, and then heading to the stadium." She refrained from further sarcasm to avoid raising his suspicion and asked, "Are you going on foot or by car?" "By car. I'm not planning to drink, and I don't want to deal with taxis or public transport. I feel more at ease being my own master." "All right, Augustine, I understand. I'll get to the beauty salon on my own. Have a good time." Rebecca tried to speak as calmly as possible, thinking her husband had no clue that she didn't trust him and planned to follow him. The parking lot was a 5-minute walk from their home, and as soon as Augustine closed the door behind him, Rebecca called a taxi and quickly got dressed. The driver wasn't surprised by her request and gave a knowing hum. "Clearly, not the first time you're involved in a stakeout, but if you don't mind, I'll give you some advice. Some secrets are better left unknown." The man drove confidently, keeping a slight distance from the car they were following, and began to share his story. "Take my first wife, for instance. She'd always be running off somewhere, saying she was going to the store or a friend's place, but wouldn't come back until late at night and would go straight to the shower. Naturally, I thought she was freshening up after seeing a lover, that snake. Of course, I got all worked up. Who likes being a cuckold?" The driver, mirroring Augustine's maneuver, turned into the supermarket parking lot and, finding a good spot to watch from, killed the engine and continued his tale. "So, one day she tells me she's going to the store, and I think, no way, you're not fooling me. I followed her, only to find out she was visiting a children's home for the mentally disabled. She had a child there, had put him there because it was too hard for her. You can only judge her if you've faced such a tragedy yourself. Back then, I was playing the saint in a white coat, full of righteous indignation. How could they keep such a secret from me?" Both Soledad and her mother were silent, and I caught my wife right at the gate of that place and caused a scene. She didn't even try to justify herself, just said she knew we'd divorce, whether it was because of truth or lies. What difference did it make? Without asking his passengers' permission, the driver lit a cigarette and continued his confession, ignoring the growing ash column. "I don't know what I would have done if she had told me the truth from the start when we were dating. Maybe I wouldn't have married her, or maybe I'd have asked to meet the child. Now I think I could have understood everything if only Soledad had been honest with me. But no, she preferred to deceive me. What would you have done in my place? Could you have forgiven her?" Rebecca didn't know how to respond to the taxi driver, but her husband emerging from the store with 2 large bags saved her from having to voice her opinion. Moreover, her opinion wouldn't have been a redemption for the man anyway. Augustine, not expecting to be followed, didn't look around, quickly approached his car, placed the bags in the trunk, and drove off. The taxi driver, maintaining a small distance, followed silently, lost in his past memories. The car, their shared family vehicle, turned off the main road onto a familiar path for Rebecca. It was another 12 kilometers to the garden community Energetic, where Augustine's mother had been allocated a plot many years ago. Rebecca had been there even before she was engaged, when she had just started dating Augustine. Belinda hadn't burdened her much with work then, and even now preferred to handle the small greenhouse and other plantings herself. She no longer grew potatoes, having replaced them with berry bushes, honeysuckle, strawberries, currants, and raspberries. The novice detective waited to see where her husband would go. There was a chance Augustine might drive further, but no, their family car turned towards the garden plots, indicators flashing. Continuing the surveillance in a taxi would be too conspicuous. Rebecca asked the driver to stop, paid him, and hurried towards her mother-in-law's plot. "Good luck," wished the driver. "Remember, everything happens for the best." Rebecca hurried to her mother-in-law's plot and saw Augustine pulling the car through the gate. She quickly hid behind an overgrown lilac bush at a nearby abandoned cottage, from where she could see what was happening. Luckily, the street-facing fence at her mother-in-law's place had not yet been replaced with metal sheets, and everything was in plain view. Rebecca nearly screamed in anger when a woman in a crop top and shorts flounced onto the porch of the summer house. The woman's figures suggested she could easily be the owner of the incriminating garment Rebecca had found in Augustine's bag. Smiling, the lover took one of the bags from Augustine. It was clear they were familiar, but Rebecca couldn't make out their conversation. Filled with rage, she emerged from her hiding spot and marched towards the summer house, ready to confront her cheating husband and his mistress in front of the neighbors. But she froze in her tracks. Standing on the porch was Rebecca's father, whom she hadn't seen in almost a year. That was when he had cruelly told her mother that he had met someone else and was leaving, taking the family savings as compensation for his share of the apartment bought during the marriage. Rebecca had tried to influence her father, pleading with him not to make any rash decisions and to consider the blow he was dealing to his wife of 25 years. She threatened to cut off all contact if he destroyed the family. It was useless. Marquez left his wife and continued to try and communicate with his daughter, sending holiday greetings, but Rebecca blocked his number. Eventually, he stopped trying to reach out, and she tried to forget about him. Later, meeting one of her father's colleagues, she learned that Marquez had resigned and left the city. Angelina might have lost her mind without her daughter's support. Rebecca practically moved in with her for several months, making sure she didn't do anything drastic. It wasn't easy to forget the happy years of marriage that were shattered by infidelity. Her mother wept on her shoulder. "Can you imagine? He said he met the love of his life. What was I to him, then? Just a passerby? An incubator for his only daughter?" Hearing this unexpected news and seeing her mother in such a state for the first time, Rebecca was in shock. She had always considered her parents' marriage unshakable, like a rock, but it turned out that years of family life could be easily undone. On one hand, Rebecca's heart felt lighter seeing her father embracing a woman she didn't know with tenderness, kissing her shoulder, and eagerly taking the bag from her. It was clear this was the same woman who had come between her parents, or as her father put it, the love of his life. Augustin, looking at this scene, seemed completely unbothered. The trio soon headed into the house. The door was left ajar, and Rebecca followed them inside, her voice trembling with anger as she greeted them. "Hello, everyone." She saw their astonished faces. Augustin was the first to react. "Rebecca, how did you get here?" "Oh, I was sitting at home, bored, and thought I'd join my husband at the football match. But it looks like you've got a tango for 3 here instead of a match. Or are some guys in shorts going to come out from the raspberry bushes and start playing ball?" "Rebecca, darling, hello." Marquez finally reacted. "I'm so glad to see you. Please, meet Eleonora. Eleonora, this is my daughter Rebecca, my pride and joy. I've told you so much about her." Rebecca quickly noted that the woman in the crop top and shorts was about her age and didn't hold back. "Oh, so this is the love of your life, the famous Eleonora with the golden hands, feet, or whatever part of her body charmed you. I can't say it's nice to meet you because I'm disgusted to see both of you. Augustin, you've really disappointed me. I never thought you'd host my deranged father and his girl at your mother's summer house. Don't talk about Eleonora like that." Rebecca's father was indignant. "Oh, as if she's some delicate flower. She didn't mind stealing a married man from his family. By the way, has Eleonora lost her shorts? My Augustin must have accidentally taken them along with the dirty towels since it's not convenient to do laundry here, or is Eleonora afraid to overwork her golden hands?" Marquez demanded, "Rebecca, stop it. Enough with the insults. Your husband is helping us at my request, and there's nothing wrong with that. Augustin is a wonderful and compassionate person. He is acting kindly, and I didn't expect such harshness and malice from you towards an innocent person. Well, I wouldn't call your Eleonora innocent. Taking a husband away from a stable and happy family, forcing him to quit a good job with a steady income, and making him live in a summer house with a bio toilet and a tank shower instead of a normal, comfortable apartment. Sorry, Dad, but he's not exactly in his prime. Yeah, that's really great. Maybe Eleonora should get a medal for her contribution to a happy life leading to the grave." Marquez's lover felt uncomfortable but remained silent. Rebecca's father didn't intervene in his daughter's angry tirade, and she redirected her anger towards her husband. "By the way, Augustin, does Belinda know her summer house has become a love nest?" Augustin lowered his eyes, and Rebecca didn't need any verbal response. It became obvious that her husband wasn't cheating on her with another woman but hadn't behaved much better. With Belinda's permission, he, out of a sense of male solidarity or some other reason, had been aiding her father and his lover. "So, you've been keeping this quiet," Rebecca gasped. "How long have you been hiding this love nest from me?" "A month, more?" "Daughter, calm down and let's talk," Marquez suggested. "It's not that simple." "Yes, I bought all sorts of treats," Augustin announced. "Let's discuss everything at the table." Rebecca didn't miss the chance to express her disdain for the woman who had wrecked her parents' marriage. "I'm not sitting at the same table with Eleonora." The young mistress shrugged and said, "Marquez, I'll go tend to the plants and pick some berries. Call me if you need any help." Augustin gently touched his wife's hand and pleaded, "Don't be angry, Rebecca. I couldn't do anything else. Marquez isn't a stranger, and he's done a lot of good for us." Rebecca pulled her hand away and didn't hold back. "Sure, a lot of good. I barely saved my mom after his betrayal. I was afraid she'd do something drastic, leave me an orphan, and all because of this Eleonora." He found himself a little mistress. Marquez, taking items from the bags Augustin had brought, set the table in silence. He knew his daughter had a quick temper but would eventually calm down, so he waited for her to vent. Sure enough, after a few minutes, Rebecca's fiery anger subsided. She sighed, sat down in her favorite chair in her mother-in-law's summer house, and addressed her father. "All right, tell me, newlywed, how did you end up living in nature? It was almost impossible to get you to visit the summer house before, and now I understand you've been here for a month, living like some sort of fugitive. I don't get why Augustin is coming here almost every other day to bring food and everything else." Marquez smiled slightly. "You're clever, you figured it all out right away. Eleonora and I really have to hide. We got ourselves into a very ugly, frightening situation. Now we have to stay away from creditors." Rebecca was extremely surprised. "Dad, how could this happen? You were always strongly against loans. What happened?" The man shrugged. "Well, even old hands make mistakes. It just happened. When I left your mom, Eleonora and I moved to her town. We bounced around rented apartments, I did odd jobs, and we saved money to buy a house in the city and start our own business. We even rented a place that Eleonora really liked. Everything was going well, our target audience received our business well, and people started coming to us. But since we were in a precarious position, we couldn't invest in proper advertising or a big PR campaign. Eleonora and I decided to make everything official, buy the house with the plot, and seriously develop our business. I had little money left, and it disappeared quickly. Eleonora suggested borrowing from her acquaintances, and from there, everything happened like a bad crime movie. On the way to the deal, we were robbed. They sideswiped the car, which Eleonora was driving on behalf of her friend, denting the fender, but thankfully, we weren't hurt. Oh, Rebecca, if you had seen how Eleonora defended me, you would never speak ill of her again. She fought like a tigress against the bandits, begging and even threatening them. She said if they laid a finger on me, they wouldn't get anything at all. It was so brave, so sincere, but so reckless. I was genuinely scared for Eleonora and felt I loved her even more. I understand this might be hard for you to hear because of your mom, but I don't want to lie to you. Anyway, they pressured us and demanded a debt amount that was beyond belief. So, we had to flee Eleonora's town. We didn't have many options for where to hide. We just needed a place to stay until Eleonora's friend, who has high-up connections, returns from her journey to India. She went there for enlightenment. One of the main conditions her guru set was a complete break from her usual reality, total disconnection from her past. So, I had to turn to Augustin as my closest person. I was very embarrassed. If it weren't for him, who knows if I'd even be alive right now. I'm very grateful my son-in-law agreed to help with our housing and supply us with everything we need. Belinda also deserves huge thanks. She understood our situation and allowed us to stay here. No one would think to look for us here, so we can live in safety. But appearing in town is still risky, so we have to rely on Augustine. I understand that we are a heavy burden on your family's budget, but I promise, as soon as our situation improves, I will reimburse all your expenses and compensate for the inconvenience. Augustine waved his hands, showing that he wasn't expecting any compensation, and Rebecca asked her embarrassed father, who was nervously folding and unfolding a candy wrapper, "Dad, couldn't you have gone to the police? If those bandits damaged the car, especially since it wasn't even yours, and tried to intimidate you, they should be held accountable. There must be some way to deal with them. I think you definitely need to file a report. Of course, it won't be a hot pursuit investigation, but we have to fight this kind of lawlessness somehow." Marquez shook his head. "Oh, Rebecca. You're still so naive. Eleonora said their local police department is completely corrupt. If we go to them, we could lose our health, or even our lives, without any trial or investigation. But aren't there oversight bodies above the police? Like the prosecutor's office or internal affairs? It's better not to go to them either. It's like diving into unknown waters. To get a proper result, you need direct connections with someone in those departments, otherwise, the case will just stall. Once Eleonora's friend returns, we might be able to turn things in our favor. For now, we have to lay low. So that's the situation, Rebecca. In my old age, I've ended up in such a mess that I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Thanks to your husband and his mother's kindness, I might still be alive, instead of lying buried somewhere like a dog." Suddenly, Rebecca felt pity for her father. He really did look like an ordinary tired man, not a blissful lover. The resentment for her mother took a back seat, and she didn't feel like being sarcastic or bringing up karma. Despite everything, this worried man was still her father. The same one who taught her to ride a bike, supported her in tough times, and explained difficult math and physics topics. He was the one who approved her decision to marry Augustine as soon as she turned 18. Her mother had insisted they wait, but her father reminded them that he and her mother had married almost right after their high school graduation. Sensing his wife's shift towards a more forgiving mood, Augustine decided not to push their luck and gently asked his father-in-law, Marquez, "Maybe we should head home?" "Oh, but you haven't even touched anything. Let's at least have some coffee and sandwiches." Marquez felt embarrassed, realizing he was offering to treat them at their own expense, and added, "Remember, Rebecca, how your grandmother used to say, defeated by your own methods." For the first time that day, Rebecca genuinely smiled. Yes, I always used to ask her what it meant, and she would explain it every time as if she was hearing the question for the first time. It became our little ceremony. "Dad, I'm sorry, but I really don't feel like eating. There's been too much news for one day, and I have work tomorrow. I need to rest well, and I also need to have a serious talk with Augustine about keeping secrets in our family life." Despite Rebecca's tone indicating the worst of the storm had passed, Augustine knew he still had some explaining to do and lowered his head apologetically. Marquez continued to thank his son-in-law, adding a word in his defense, "Thank you for everything. Go home and rest. Just, daughter, don't be mad at your husband and don't scold him, he's a gem. If anyone's to blame, it's me." Rebecca left her favorite chair and hesitated, unsure of what to do next. Should she hug and kiss her father goodbye as she had for many years, or just say goodbye? Neither option felt right. The tension was broken by Eleonora, who entered the house with plastic containers filled with ripe berries. "Here, I picked these for you and Belinda. As far as I know, she should be back from the sanatorium soon. Marquez and I will figure out where to move by then so we don't inconvenience the rightful owner." Seeing her father's young lover reignited Rebecca's anger. "Look at you, managing other people's property so boldly, such a cheeky minx. Although it was already clear, you took a married man away from his family, and now you're just collecting and handing out someone else's berries, all while you make sure to take care of yourself, of course." Augustin wrapped his arms around his wife's waist and gently but firmly guided her toward the exit to avoid a confrontation between the women. Rebecca complied, suddenly realizing how exhausted she was from monitoring him and dealing with the overwhelming news. Marquez went to see his daughter and son-in-law to their car, signaling for Eleonora to stay behind to avoid provoking another outburst of hostility. On the way home, Rebecca tried to keep her irritation with the situation under control. Of course, she was glad that Augustin was faithful and mentally patted herself on the back for not sharing her suspicions of his infidelity with her mother. However, how to react to her father's partial return was completely unclear. Afraid of distracting her husband while he was driving, Rebecca silently contemplated the unfolding events. Moreover, she found her father's new partner particularly unappealing, as if she were being insincere. She brought the berries as though she had picked them from her own garden, generously wasting someone else's bounty. At home, Augustin tried to anticipate and fulfill every desire of his wife to improve her mood. After dinner, he finally decided to apologize. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you about Marquez sooner. I was afraid you'd be upset." "You were right to be afraid. My father's actions felt like a real end to my childhood. You know, I even thought about not speaking to him at all, even if he begged for a meeting. But when I faced him, I felt sorry for him. Oh, I'm afraid Eleonora clearly doesn't have the best intentions living with my father in that house with limited amenities." Augustin tried to justify his father-in-law's new partner. "Rebecca, you know you're judging her unfairly and with bias. Personally, I think Eleonora is very affectionate towards Marquez. She cooks for him, maintains the house, and overall, my dear, I think you're being overly critical. She had a very tough past but hasn't become bitter. Can you imagine? At 18, she had to take care of her elderly grandmother, a younger sister, and a little brother. Yet, Eleonora managed to get an education, albeit a vocational one, but in a sought-after field. I'm not interested in the biography of this schemer. Augustin, have you also fallen under her influence? You men are so predictable. A clever woman gets you wrapped around her finger, and you're ready to defend her and destroy your family over her. Rebecca, you simply haven't seen the way she cares for Marquez. It's impossible to describe. And how she defended him during the attack. Augustin, you didn't see it, Rebecca reasonably countered. Fear can exaggerate things, and it's possible that the incident was quite different from what you heard. Rebecca was frustrated and didn't want to continue discussing her father's relationship with his new partner, so she concluded the topic. Fine, it's probably not my place, but I'll just say one thing. It might be wise for my dad and his girlfriend to rent a place in the same area. I think there were a few options on the adjacent line. Augustin agreed with his wife's suggestion. You're right. My mom is used to being alone both in the city apartment and at the summer house. She wouldn't like it if someone else was managing her space at the same time. I'll post an announcement in the summer house chat about renting a house for the rest of the season. I'll be visiting my mom anyway, and it'll be a chance to check in on Marquez. Then, when your dad's influential friend returns, maybe the situation will resolve itself peacefully. We do have bank accounts, and we could withdraw some money to help Marquez out. Are you out of your mind? My dad betrayed me and Mom, and you haven't felt even a fraction of the emotional pain we have. And now I'm supposed to give up my savings and yours? And lose interest on top of that? They can forget about the money. All right, dear, calm down. I understand, we won't touch the accounts. During conversations and meetings with her mother, Rebecca feared accidentally revealing that she knew where her father was, and Belinda also kept Marquez's secret. Although they couldn't rent a well-equipped summer house, Augustin managed to secure a nearly free, overgrown plot almost at the edge of the area, paying only for water and electricity. The location wasn't ideal for people looking to harvest, but it was a good option for fugitives. Marquez and Eleonora, having packed their few belongings, moved to their new place. Augustin continued to provide them with everything they needed, which soon began to irritate Rebecca. First, because the funds were coming from the family budget, which could be somewhat managed and optimized, and second, and most importantly, Rebecca was disgusted by the need to support her father and his mistress. She felt that by doing so, she was betraying her own mother. Keeping the secret became increasingly difficult, especially since her mother-in-law was planning to celebrate her anniversary at the summer house in early August. Rebecca was becoming more anxious, as the likelihood of an accidental encounter between her divorced parents was increasing, which was unacceptable. A week before the celebration, she asked Augustine to take her to the summer house so she could have a serious talk with her father. She wanted to firmly explain that the following weekend he and Eleonora should stay hidden in the house. Leaving her husband and mother-in-law on their plot, Rebecca went to the line of summer houses near the forest. Many of the owners of these 600 square meters had long abandoned them, and the street was almost impassable due to overgrown sea buckthorn and lilacs. However, the dense vegetation provided shade, which was a relief in the unusual August heat. Rebecca walked slowly, rehearsing what she would say. Almost at the entrance to the right plot, she heard Eleonora's annoying voice. Rebecca was about to barge in and rudely interrupt the conversation, but some sixth sense made her stop. The mistress's words were quite unexpected. "No, Rolando, I told you that it's not working out right now. This Rebecca is ruining the whole plan. If it weren't for her, I would have squeezed everything I could from these sheep already. Instead, we're stuck living in this rundown summer house, using an outdoor toilet, and bathing only when the water in the tank heats up. The worst part is having to look this old idiot in the eye. At least the heat is making him lose interest in me, so I don't have to share a bed with him. Although it's not really a bed here, it's more like a complete ordeal. Oh, my dear Rolando, you probably won't even recognize me after these few months. I haven't been to a spa, haven't gone to the gym, and haven't seen a stylist. I'm a complete mess, but it'll do for that fool Marquez. Once I convince him to sell his share of the apartment here, we'll have that money. Real estate prices here are almost like in the capital. With the money we got from the fake robbery, we'll be able to move somewhere nice by the sea." Eleonora's tone shifted from irritated to cooing, and Rebecca was almost impressed by how the cynical woman manipulated her conversation partner so artfully. However, this admiration would have been much stronger if Eleonora were an actress. As it was unclear when the father's mistress was lying. Rebecca was hardly surprised by what she heard. She had suspected something like this. Fortunately, she had the foresight to record Eleonora's speech. Although the quality on her phone wasn't great, it was still possible to make out everything. Towards the end of the conversation, Eleonora's speech turned into a series of exclamations. She talked about how much she missed Rolando, and Rebecca became very curious about how Eleonora would react if she learned that there was incriminating evidence against her. Holding back her initial impulse, Rebecca waited until the mistress had finished her conversation and then entered the gate. It was clear to Rebecca that Eleonora was extracting money, but since proving it was difficult, she decided to leave things as they were. The plan now was to provoke the greedy Eleonora and show her father the true nature of the woman who had destroyed their happy family. Thinking she wouldn't hear anything new, Rebecca opened the gate and was shocked by the metamorphosis. Eleonora chirped, apparently worried that an adversary might have overheard the conversation and reported to her father. "Oh, hello, Rebecca. Please come in, I made some soup. I think it's delicious. Let me treat you, and then your dad will come back. He went to the spring, thinking no one he knows would be there." Rebecca decided not to say everything she wanted and simply asked, "How long has Dad been gone?" "He'll be back soon." "Well, I'll take a walk for a bit. It's not very interesting here with you." Meeting her father on the forest path, Rebecca asked, "Listen to me and try to believe. Eleonora is just using you to get money. The attack on you was staged, and here at the summer house, she is hiding from a fake danger. Here, listen to the recording I made." Marquez listened to Eleonora's unguarded speech and his face changed. Rebecca felt sorry for him but didn't stop the recording. It was better to face the bitter truth immediately. "Yes, daughter, modern technology has come a long way. Admit it, You must have somehow faked Eleanora's voice to make me quarrel with her. Rebecca was disheartened. She realized her father's feelings for the shameless, unscrupulous liar were deep. Any attempts to tell or even provide visual evidence that the mistress intended to acquire luxury property at others' expense would be met with dissatisfaction and even scandal. She needed to somehow convince her father and open his eyes. "Dad, please, don't rush to get money for her. She'll come up with something else to cheat you. Then I'll set up a test. I'll say that we'll bring money to pay off the debts, and you and Augustine will watch her to see how she acts. It would be good to have a few strong guys to help us." "I think that's manageable, Dad," Rebecca replied. "Let's go to our place for now to discuss all the details." Not even glancing at his overgrown house, Marquez headed to his son-in-law's place with his daughter. They planned to lure Eleanora's accomplices out. That evening, Eleanora noticed again that Marquez was cold towards her but didn't pay it much attention. Her detachment suited her perfectly. It was only when Marquez informed her that the son-in-law had agreed to provide the money, but only in cash, that Eleanora nearly jumped for joy. "My dear, my sunshine, we'll be able to return to our usual way of life again. Isn't that wonderful?" Augustine was smiling. Everything was going exactly as they had planned. Thanks to a friend of his, he had managed to enlist the help of former Special Forces operatives for the sting operation. When Eleanora's accomplices arrived at the summer house, squeezing their car along the overgrown path, Marquez was waiting on the porch. The goons seized the bundle of money, holding guns on them, and then were swiftly subdued by the brave operatives. Eleanora was treated very delicately, while Marquez, coming up almost close enough to touch, announced, "You're an idiot, Eleanora. You wanted to scam me again, but you didn't realize you talked too much and in places you shouldn't. Fortunately, Rebecca overheard your cooing conversation, so if you don't want to end up in jail for fraud along with these fools, you'll pay back what you stole from me with the help of your friends." Eleanora had no choice but to write an acknowledgement of debt. Embarrassed, Marquez asked Augustine to drive him to the city and hurry to his wife, buying a luxurious bouquet of flowers on the way. "Angelia, forgive me, it's like I was possessed, but I'm glad our daughter managed to expose that scammer. Can we try to restart our relationship?" Angelia smiled at her ex-husband, and he thought he had found the key to her heart. But then she suddenly announced, "Actually, I've started a new love story, and you don't fit into it. So, if you want, we can sell my modest place and split the money. Just keep in mind that it's not entirely fair. You took almost everything when we divorced, and I didn't fight for a single item. Since they were important to you, you took them, and now you've suddenly realized you sold them too cheaply." Rebecca was strongly against her father getting back together with her mother, and Marquez was left with nothing but the suitcase returned by Eleanora.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.